landmark.
I wonder what you thought of Chad's remarks in the light of what happened on 9/11.
Well, it's definitely very surreal to see all of this stuff begin to happen in the real world. As kind of an anecdotal fact, it turns out that the skyline that we used in Deus Ex for New York is missing the trade towers.
I noticed that too, yeah.
And that was not, it wasn't deliberate, it was left out just by the artist in the process of creating the art, and the decision was made not to waste the time to go back and put them in. We just figured, okay, we'll just fictionalize that the trade towers were destroyed by a terrorist act. And we never really put that into the game as content, but that was our decision, and we kind of made it lightly at the time, as though, okay, whatever, we'll just destroy the trade towers. And now it's happened for real, and it feels a lot more weighty than a few pixels in a piece of art that a few designers can erase or add in as they see fit.
And do you feel that the imaginary terrorists in the game, the NSF, the National Secessionist Force, have I got that correctly? Do they have, I don't want to say they have an enemy in common with Osama bin Laden, but do they have a similar agenda, or?
In a sense, I mean, they're definitely homegrown terrorists compared to the kind of real terrorists that the United States is facing right now. But they have similarities in that, I mean, it almost sounds trite to say it, but they are kind of going after the big capital that supposedly runs the world and runs business. And I think it's very similar if you look at the world globally and where terrorists come from and where the desperation is bred that makes terrorism and especially suicide, bombings, and that kind of thing possible. There is a subtle, maybe not even subtle, just disparity in wealth and circumstance for people around the world. And even though a country like the United States or maybe any first world country may put a happy face on their global policies for protecting their interests around the world and whatnot, the bottom line is that they look after their interests. They use their capital that they've built up over centuries of being a step ahead of everyone else, and they use that as their lever to get work out of less fortunates and build greater wealth for themselves. So I think that same sentiment drives a lot of the militia movements in the United States, the people that rebel against taxes, and a lot of the people who develop the conspiracy theories to begin with about the world banks and the Illuminati and the high and mighty.
There's a very sly line at the very beginning when you're being introduced to the NSF, which are formerly your enemies. The doctor Jaime Reyes, who's very credible, says these guys think they're fighting the Second American Revolution, and immediately cast my mind back to the First American Revolution and how that war was fought as a war over property with us. And one could say that the American army, a citizen army, was much less organized, much more difficult to pin down, and fighting by different rules than the British were. And that was.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the goals of a lot of these groups in the United States now, for whatever merit they may have, are definitely parallel to the original American Revolution, which was independence from a larger mercantile entity. And in that sense, I think they're very parallel.
I was reading a story about an American and a Bear poet who met. And the Bear said that poets always wrote about what they have least. And he said that's why his poems were about water. And then he turned to the American and said, and I noticed that your poems are always about love. And what do you think that people with computers, people who play computer games and who get into them deeply, what is it that they have least of? And what is it and do the computer games like Deus Ex provide it?
Well, I think all across science fiction there's this, and maybe even beyond science fiction, there's this kind of what I call urban pastoral component to so much of what is being written these days as entertainment. And I think of it in terms of during the Industrial Revolution, where so many poets began to write, poets who were living in dingy cities started to write these wonderful, beautiful poems about the countryside, which they no longer were a part of. And I think that so much of current literature writes in the same way about inner city life and the hardships of the street and this really greedy underworld that is completely foreign to most of the people who consume the entertainment product. And I would include, the cyberpunk fiction in that, and definitely most video games, and probably our game as well.
During the game, it's possible if the player or the avatar so chooses to kill people using any number of really sophisticated ways, flamethrowers, pistols, darts, machetes, swords, whatever. But it's actually not possible in the game, even when you're confronted with a companion or a prostitute, to actually take that prostitute away. Is there, and take the prostitute to bed.
Hello. 100 credits. A pleasing companion.
Sure.
Have a good time. What is your name? A dance partner for you? 100 credits.
I already have a date. Thanks.
It's much more fun with two. What is your job?
What are the legal reasons and any philosophical reasons why that's not possible in a video game in America right now?
Well, there's probably a prosaic answer to that and a more philosophical one. Excuse me. I definitely agree that the American sensibilities are very imbalanced regarding violence and sex, and it is very disturbing that we can have a game where you can, hit somebody with a machine gun, but where sex would be very inflammatory and disturbing to a lot of people. Our decision to do it was, more mundane, where we actually had talked about it kind of informally among the designers, where, we thought maybe you could pay a prostitute or whatever for a night, and like in a cheesy action movie, you fade to black and you fade up, and the next morning there she is, your friend, and she tells you some information. And, that's not an extraordinary plot point. It wasn't really that important to us to get that particular thing in. But, the reason not to do it was that it creates this time thing that messes with the design, with time passing. You need the engine to be able to move you from locations. And if we were going to do a love scene, that would be a lot of art assets, a lot of effort. And so we didn't really put out effort into specific character interactions. So it's almost all dialogue and then some pretty canned voice lip syncing. So that, for us, the resources just weren't there. I don't know if we particularly had we were afraid of being sued for putting sex in the game.
Yeah, it's ironic because no one will file a lawsuit for your creating a game in which a flamethrower can be whipped out and you can literally fry to a crisp 50 Americans. But
if we had a naked woman in there, it would be all over the news probably.
That's right.
So yeah, I definitely think that's a little bit wrong. But it's also true that games these days, it's very easy to hurl a bullet across a map and decide whether it hits something, whether it collides with a collision cylinder or something. Whereas it's much harder to build a human being that looks alive and really seems to be expressing love and whatnot. And I think that, for sound business reasons and for, perhaps lack of, adventurousness, people will take the route that, is easy to implement with today's technology.